Sunset light filtered through the dusty windows of the old estate's sitting room, casting elongated shadows across the floor. For decades, the place had seemed abandoned, but it was now Clara's new home, inherited from her great-aunt Edna. At first glance, the sprawling house seemed like some romantic relic, a place where secrets dozed in the corners and the ghosts of old dreams wandered the corridors. When she pushed the heavy front door open and dragged her suitcases inside, the air clung to her skin with musty warmth. Clara made her way through the labyrinth of rooms until she found the sitting room, with its antique furniture and tall windows draped in velvet. It was in that room, perched on a side table near a tall lamp, that she first noticed the music box. A single swirl of dust in the setting sun highlighted its polished wooden exterior, faintly embossed with swirling patterns. Its shape was unusually tall for a traditional music box, and the edges showed wear, as though generations of hands had touched it, halfway between affection and apprehension. For a moment, Clara thought little of it. She was tired from her cross-state trip, and there was so much to unpack. But something about the little box kept glinting in her peripheral vision, tugging at the corner of her mind. A few days passed uneventfully. Clara settled into the estate, rummaging through closets and trunks, somewhat overwhelmed by an avalanche of family heirlooms. Her Aunt Edna's presence lingered between the walls, a warmth of memory and loneliness all at once. Often, while exploring drawers and boxes, Clara would come across old letters, diaries, or photographs that hinted at mysteries never fully explained, yet none of them felt more suggestive of a hidden story than that music box. Sometimes at night she thought she heard a melody, a faint lullaby behind her bedroom door, but she assumed it was just her imagination in this old creaking place. Eventually, curiosity got the better of her. She took the music box to her bedroom one evening, setting it on the small table next to her lamp. The day's tasks had been exhausting, and as she changed into her pajamas, she found herself eyeing the box. She noticed a tiny brass key clamped onto one side, disconnected from any obvious wind-up mechanism. When she held her breath, she could swear she heard a gentle tinkling from inside, as though the gears were quietly turning all by themselves. She turned the key. Nothing obvious happened. The lid didn't open and no music escaped. The only unusual detail she discovered was a seamless crack around the box's circumference, hidden by the swirling carvings. It seemed the top and bottom of the box could come apart, but they refused to budge under her attempts to pry them open. After a few more minutes of examination, she gave up. The night was late, and weariness finally settled in. Clara placed the box back on her side table and switched off the lamp. Sometime deep in the night, she jolted upright. A delicate lullaby, impossibly sad and haunting, trickled through the dark. Felt like it was coming from a distance, yet she knew in her gut it was originating right next to her. Groggily reaching for the lamp switch, she fumbled in the dark. The tune continued, even as her shaky hand finally found the knob and flooded the room with light. The music box sat exactly where she had left it, but now it emitted that soft lullaby. Unsure if she was dreaming, she placed her palm on top of the box. She could feel a gentle vibration as the music played. Her heart thudded against her ribs. She struggled to think logically. Perhaps the internal mechanism was triggered earlier when she tried to wind it. Regardless, the music's notes were unsettling, each one sending prickles down her spine. She couldn't decide whether it was heartbreakingly beautiful or irredeemably eerie. Suddenly, she sensed motion out of the corner of her eye, a flicker of dark fabric across the yard outside her window. She turned quickly but saw nothing except a faint rustling in the trees. For the rest of the night, she barely slept. In the morning, she doubted herself, attributing all of it to a half-remembered dream. Yet over the following nights, the lullaby repeatedly returned in the darkest hours. Each time, Clara was too paralyzed by confusion and fear to investigate further. She recognized the melody, changing subtly, as if it were telling an evolving story. The final notes always seemed to linger a second too long, pregnant with tension, before abruptly cutting off. And each new day, the people in town reacted strangely when she mentioned the music box. The house had gained a local reputation, though no one ever told her plainly what the rumors were. After a week, Clara visited the only antique store in the small town. a cramped place lined with dusty porcelain dolls, chipped vases, and tarnished silverware. Its proprietor was an elderly woman named Lucinda, whose white hair was pinned into a neat bun. Lucinda's gaze turned somber the moment Clara described her inherited music box. Lucinda shook her head before Clara even finished speaking. "It's best if you leave some things alone," Lucinda warned. "That house has always been full of heartbreak. Edna was a dear friend, but she never let me see that box, though I knew she had it. It's connected to an event most folks around here would rather forget." Clara insisted she wanted more information. Lucinda's gnarled fingers toyed with the cameo brooch at her throat. She looked torn between refusing and revealing. Finally, she motioned for Clara to follow her into a cramped stockroom in the back. Nestled among half-grown crates, Lucinda produced an old black and white photograph. "This was taken nearly 60 years ago," she murmured. The photograph showed a group of townsfolk standing in front of what looked like a church. In the front row stood a man in a crisp suit and a woman clutching a peculiar, ornate music box. That man was Reverend Fletcher, and the woman was Julia Fields, your great-grandmother. The music box was a gift from the Reverend, custom-made for her child's christening. Clara stared at the photograph. "Child's christening? Did that child die?" she asked hesitantly, unsure why she felt the question was relevant. Lucinda lowered her gaze. "It was rumored the baby never made it to adulthood. Some claims say it was sickly and died after a few months. Others say something more sinister happened, particularly because Reverend Fletcher was known for his, let's say, unorthodox methods." Cold dread pricked up Clara's arms. She pressed further, but Lucinda's lips tightened, and she shook her head repeatedly. "The real truth is locked away with the old families in the church archives. The rest is speculation, but I will say that box was central to the funeral ceremony. An odd choice for a child's burial." She exhaled slowly. "Some say it was used not once but twice." Clara felt her pulse rush in her ears. She gingerly handed the photograph back. "You can't just leave me with that. I need to know." Lucinda sighed. "Ask around if you must, but be warned. You might find yourself in the same predicament as Edna." She guarded that box closely, as though she feared it. Maybe she believed it held the key to a darkness that plagued your family. Despite her growing trepidation, Clara thanked Lucinda and left. Over the next few days, she made inquiries around town, but most residents avoided her questions, darting their eyes away as if the matter was taboo. She started to sense that people watched her house at night, although each time she looked out the window, the street appeared empty except for a stray cat or a flickering lamppost. Meanwhile, the lullabies continued. Her sleep suffered, and shadows under her eyes deepened. The music would begin at random times, sometimes just after midnight, sometimes near dawn. Always the same sequence of notes, with slight variation. The effect was mesmerizing, as if the box was weaving an incomplete story, beckoning her to piece it together. She began to wake earlier and earlier, noting down the patterns of the music in a small notebook, hoping to crack the code within the melody. On the 9th night, she gathered her courage, rose during the lullaby, and walked toward the box. Her heart hammered with such force she wondered if it would bruise her ribcage. When she set her fingers upon the wooden surface, the tune sharpened in vibration, sending stinging tingles through her hand. She turned the key again, and this time the top unexpectedly flipped open. The inside was even stranger than she'd imagined. The mechanical apparatus was made of delicate silver, decorated with wrought metal flowers. In the center sat a tiny figurine of a child, arms reaching upward in a pleading gesture. Its face was carved with uncanny detail, right down to the softly parted lips and tear-shaped eyes. As she watched, the figurine slowly rotated, producing each note. Then, as if spurred by Clara's proximity, the lullaby shifted to a new sequence, more rapid, urgent. A swirl of goosebumps filled her entire body. Suddenly she was jolted by a whisper in her ear. She spun around, certain someone had entered the room. But no one was there. The stillness weighed heavily. She peered back into the box, and the tiny figurine's eyes seemed trained on her as though it were pleading for release. The next moment, the lid snapped shut on its own, nearly catching her fingers. That lullaby followed her into her dreams, but now the dreams were more vivid, more revealing. She saw flickers of a woman dressed in a nightgown, running through the house's corridors with the music box clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She heard faint cries of an infant echoing through the gloom, accompanied by the hushed chanting of what felt like an entire congregation. In the center of these visions stood a tall man with piercing eyes, presumably Reverend Fletcher. Over and over, the dream replayed the same events: a nighttime gathering of townfolk, a candlelit vigil, and then the child's screams cut short by the hush of that eerie lullaby. Clara awoke covered in cold sweat. She needed more specific information, so she resolved to investigate the church archives. Perhaps something in the old records could confirm or dispel the swirling rumors. The following day, a heavy rain battered the town. Determined and armed with a sense of purpose, Clara donned her raincoat and made her way to the aging stone church at the edge of town. Within the church's library, a timid parish secretary granted her access to the older records. She pored over births, deaths, and marriage logs from thousands of dusty pages. Eventually, she found a reference to her great-grandmother, Julia Fields, whose exact date of death was unclear. Another bizarre detail. She discovered one chilling line. Service for the child was led by Reverend Fletcher in a private ceremony. The mother demanded a closed casket. She departed with the child's music box. That was all. No further explanation, no cause of death, no mention of what had prompted a secret burial in the dead of night. Clara felt a pressure in her chest, a sense that she was edging closer to a truth the town wanted locked away. She widened her search, stumbling upon local newspaper clippings from that era in a battered binder. One short, cryptic news piece read, "Reverend Fletcher's devotion to the unholy. Accusations of forbidden practices swirl amid rumors of a missing child in the congregation." Yet it never named the child. The piece was abruptly cut off, followed by a blank page. The notes ended suspiciously. So something big had happened, something enough to implicate a man revered by many, but the official narrative was incomplete. That evening, she confronted the music box once more, an unspoken tension crackling in the air. The lullaby started around midnight as if responding to her presence. She moved carefully, lifting the lid with her trembling fingers. The figurine spun, its silent face turned toward her, urging her deeper into a memory that didn't belong to her, but was part of her lineage. The melody seemed to shift again, faster and more discordant, until it settled on a single repeated note that reverberated in Clara's skull. When the note stopped, she sensed a voice behind her would speak. Instead, she only heard silence, so thick it made her ears ring. She found herself stepping backward. A wave of dizziness forced her to sit on the bed's edge. She thought for a moment she saw a faint outline of a woman standing at her door. Then the figure vanished into the shadows. Perhaps it was a hallucination, or perhaps the house truly harbored specters from its anguished past. Seeking a dose of normalcy, Claire invited the local librarian Graham to the estate the next night. Graham was known in town for his knowledge of historical riddles and genealogical puzzles. She showed him the box, recounted her visits to the archives, and fell silent to gauge his reaction. To her surprise, Graham's usually bright expression darkened. "I've heard stories," he admitted, adjusting his glasses. "They say Reverend Fletcher practiced exorcisms on children he deemed afflicted. There's a rumor about a ritual that took place at your house, some unholy ceremony to purge a newborn of a devilish ailment. It's said the Reverend believed the infant carried some curse, yet I've never seen proof. People around here keep the details hush." Clara's pulse quickened at the horrific possibility that her great-grandmother's child might have been the subject of that exorcism. Why would they record the child's death as natural causes, and then keep it a secret? Graham explained. "Think about it. If the Reverend convinced your family that an exorcism was necessary and something went dreadfully wrong, it's logical they would bury the truth. The church was powerful back then. The scandal could have ruined reputations, maybe even led to legal consequences. So, the church and your ancestors struck a silent deal. That's just my theory." She felt faintly ill. The idea that the child was intentionally harmed or died during some misguided ritual made her stomach churn. Graham hesitated before continuing, but some folks claim that child never died at all. I've read rumors of a child taken away for secret treatment. No one knows what happened after that. There's no solid record of a gravestone or official cause of death. A swirl of confusion flooded Clara. So, he or she might still have been alive? But how does the music box tie in? Graham glanced at it. I've only heard rumors that the lullaby was used in that ceremony. They believed the melody could usher out evil spirits or something along those lines. Each note of the music was thought to hold supernatural properties. Far-fetched, I know, but in a small town with a fervent religious figure, it might have been taken as gospel. Later that night, Clara felt consumed by an electric restlessness. She couldn't resign herself to half-baked theories. Once she was alone, she lit several candles, placed them around the bedroom, and opened the music box carefully. The lullaby's notes drifted into the room as if carried on an otherworldly breeze. She closed her eyes, letting the mournful strains seep into her consciousness. She was determined to face whatever secrets were locked within, no matter how horrifying. Gradually, images flooded her mind. She stood in the shadows of her great-aunt's house, witnessing a scene from the past. Flickering candlelight revealed a small congregation, 6 or 7 individuals aligned in a semicircle. A frail infant lay on an altar in the very sitting room where Clara had first spotted the music box. Reverend Fletcher held the box up like a talisman, winding to produce a slow, methodical lullaby. The child's cries mingled with the melody, but the congregation remained stone-faced, chanting about purification and salvation. Then came a sudden hush. The infant's cries fell silent, replaced by a terrifying stillness. At the center of the circle, the child no longer moved. Julia Fields, the mother, screamed. She lunged forward to scoop the baby into her arms, only to be restrained by Reverend Fletcher and 2 others. In desperation and grief, she clawed for the child, but the congregation forced the casket closed, the lullaby still playing in the background. Traumatized tears streamed down Julia's face as she fought to open the small coffin. One final note from the music box resonated, piercing, dissonant, final. Then the vision ended. Clara's eyes snapped open, tears smearing her cheeks. The candle flames wavered, but their light remained. The music box's tune faltered and ceased. She now understood at least part of the horror. The child had died, or appeared to die, during that so-called ritual. For a brief moment, the lullaby had revealed the tragedy burned into its memory. But was there more? She recalled Graham's speculation that the infant might have survived. If so, the ritual was not only cruel but also a cover-up for something else. She needed closure. She had to confront the final piece, the old graveyard behind the church. Under the cover of twilight, she slipped out of her house with a flashlight and the music box tucked under her arm. The cemetery gates creaked as she pushed them open. Rows of mossy headstones stretched out. Some crumbled, their inscriptions worn illegible. She moved slowly, playing the lullaby from the music box, hoping the sound might guide her. The night air vibrated with the tune, layering the gravestones with an aura of otherworldly sadness. Then she noticed an older plot near the far corner, overgrown with tangled vines, where a small headstone lay flat on the ground. The adjacent marker had collapsed. Something about the area felt off, deserted, as if the caretaker refused to maintain it. When Clara shone her flashlight over the headstone's face, she found only a partial name carved into the stone. Field. The rest was lost to erosion. Could this be the child's grave? She sank to her knees, brushing away dead leaves. The music box's lullaby sounded restless now, as though the silver gears were working beyond normal capacity. She gently placed the box on the stone. A gust of wind extinguished her flashlight, plunging her into darkness. The music flowed richer, more insistent. It felt like the wind itself carried the lamentation of that child, echoing through time. A shaky voice spoke from behind her. "Clara, is that you?" It was Graham. He'd come searching, driven by concern when she failed to respond to his calls. She turned to find him standing in the moonlight, eyes wide at the spectacle of the vibrating music box. "Something happened here," she whispered. "Maybe the child is buried after all. Or perhaps it's just an empty grave. I'm not certain anymore." Together they knelt by the marker, noticing that it was indeed a child's plot. Graham carefully dug around the perimeter with his hands, searching for clues. Under a patch of dirt, he retrieved a small, rotted wooden cross. Carved onto it, they could just make out, "Our Beloved." The rest was too decayed to read. Suddenly, a violent tremor coursed through the ground. The music box's lullaby skipped notes, producing a harsh discord. Something deep under the earth seemed to shift. Clara gasped and sprang backward, certain the ground might snap open. The wind gathered force, swirling leaves and dust into a vortex. The discordant lullaby escalated, as if it were crying out. With a final clang, the box's mechanism stopped altogether. The hush that followed was more bone-chilling than the music. She reached to pick it up, her hand trembling. The figurine inside had changed position. Now its tiny arms hung limp. The child's face was turned downward, an expression of gentle sorrow. If it was possible for a figurine to look relieved, this was it. Somehow, in that moment, Clara knew the music box had served its purpose. It had pushed her to unearth the tragedy from the shadows, to confront whatever remained unspoken in her lineage. Whether the child had truly died or been spirited away in a desecrated ceremony, the music box's restless spirit was now eased by the truth finally being exposed. She felt it like a warm wave passing through the night air. Yet the story didn't end with just a feeling of resolution. In the following days, Clara shared her findings with a few remaining relatives and with Graham, who helped carve a new nameplate for the battered headstone. Town gossip once again stirred. Some branded her a meddler, reviving old horrors better left buried. But a few, including Lucinda, thanked her for releasing decades of pent-up guilt that had lingered like a poisonous cloud over the community. There was talk that maybe the church should apologize for any involvement, though such an act might never come. The lullabies stopped after that final night in the cemetery. Days turned into weeks with no nighttime melodies haunting Clara's sleep. Yet the music box remained in her possession. She kept it carefully stowed away in a cupboard, uncertain if it should ever be destroyed or passed on. Part of her felt that, despite the revelations, an undercurrent of mystery still pulsed in its silver gears. Had the entire truth truly come to light? Or was there another layer to the scandal that still lurked in the corners of the town's forbidden past? Clara found she could live with not knowing every detail. Sometimes, closure lies not in absolute certainty, but in acknowledging the pain and allowing it to heal. She continued to research her family line, discovering small hints that the child might have been hidden with a traveling relative for medical care before succumbing to an unknown ailment. Another rumor floated by that the Reverend had whisked the baby away as proof of his exorcism's success. Both versions ended bitterly, culminating in quiet heartbreak. As the estate regained some semblance of warmth, Clara breathed new life into its rooms. She replaced peeling wallpaper, mended broken furniture, and restored tarnished sconces. On certain peaceful afternoons, she liked to stand at the sitting room window, sipping tea and gazing at the vibrant poplar trees beyond the yard. She would drift into a thoughtful reverie, remembering that hush of the lullaby echoing at the edges of her mind. In those private moments, she felt close to the child she'd never met, a part of her family's tapestry, woven with both love and sorrow. Occasionally, she'd hear the faint ticking of the music box's mechanism from inside the cupboard, especially when a storm battered the old estate. She left it untouched, letting the final lullaby rest, believing that it had already told the story it was meant to tell. Whenever the wind moaned late at night and she dreamed about her great-grandmother's tearful face, she'd awaken with a start, her memories swirling. Yet there was no more fear, only a calm acceptance. She was the caretaker of this secret now, entrusted by those who had come before and shaped by the truths she had unearthed. When townspeople asked her about the box, she just smiled softly, neither confirming nor denying their whispered speculations. Perhaps in staying silent, she honored the child's memory more faithfully than if she flaunted it for gossip. Her nightly rest became sound, untroubled by ghostly refrains. The estate, for all its age and hidden dramas, now offered her a sense of belonging. The dust had been shaken off old corners, both literally and metaphorically. Maybe the place had finally remembered what it was like to harbor peace rather than sorrow. The scandal that once lay buried in the town's history was out in the open, at least enough for Clara to free herself from sleepless nights and intangible whispers. Yet she sensed the final slivers of mystery, forever suspended in the hush between notes, exhaling softly from the music box like a secret lullaby that only those who truly listen could ever hear. In that hush, Rosa felt the presence of something, a delicate union of life and death, regret and absolution. It was the hush of truths that, hidden for decades, had finally found the faintest voice. The hush that signaled an end to the old cycle of lies, and perhaps the first heartfelt beginning for something new. The hush that echoed, even in silence, a lullaby that would never be forgotten.